Hey everyone, it's Gavin, and today I'm going to be talking about a book that I feel that every high school student should read. It's called The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Sorry, my cat's outside. Let me get that. So, The Great Gatsby. It's an amazing read. I had a lot of fun reading it, and although it's shorter, there's a lot of great themes and metaphors and symbolism in the book, and it's also really relevant to today, even though it was written so long ago. So I think there's a lot of reasons that people would still be interested in it, and that I think every student should read it. But before we get into that, I kind of want to talk about what the book's about. So it's from a first-person perspective of this guy named Nick Carraway, who moves from the Midwest to New York, Long Island, this really nice part of Long Island called East Egg, where all these rich people live. He finds a nice small house that he's able to afford, but he's working in bonds, so he's not making that much money. His cousin Daisy lives nearby. She's really rich, and she's married to this guy named Tom. Now, Tom is openly cheating on her, which is kind of acceptable in this book, which is surprising to me, but it goes to show like the social class of women at the time and how it's changed so much, but we'll get into that later. Jay Gatsby is Nick's new neighbor. Now, he lives in this humongous house, and he throws these amazing parties, and there's a lot of mystery surrounding him, and Nick wants to learn about him. He eventually gets invited to a party, goes to the party, and gets to meet him alongside this girl named Jordan that he met, who's kind of a love interest, but not really. So for a lot of the book, Nick is getting to know Gatsby, and they actually become pretty good friends, but Nick always finds there's something off about him. The way Gatsby lives is kind of through other people. He wants people to think he's super rich and he's made all this money, which he has, but a lot of it is just this fake persona that he's trying to project to the world that may not actually be who he is. And what Nick finally learns is that Gatsby used to be in love with Daisy, and still is, but Daisy ended up marrying Tom and having a kid. So Gatsby kind of bought this house near her. He always looks out at her dock at her green light, which is a piece of symbolism I'll touch on later. So a lot happens in the middle of the book, but basically what happens is the entire group goes out for lunch one day. Tom, Gatsby end up getting in a huge fight over Daisy. Daisy says she loves Gatsby, but she's not really sure. On their way back, Tom's mistress Myrtle gets hit by Daisy and Gatsby in their car. Daisy was driving. Tom doesn't know this. He gets there, sees Myrtle dead. He's sad about it, but Wilson, her actual husband, he doesn't want him to know. So Tom tells Wilson that Gatsby killed his wife to get back at him. Wilson ends up going to Gatsby's house, killing him in the pool, and then shooting himself dead. And that's kind of the end of Gatsby's legacy. We learn that Daisy ends up going off with Tom. Nick is kind of saddened by the fact that no one actually came to Gatsby's funeral. Even though when he was living, so many people came to his parties and seemed to care about him. The only guy who ends up coming back is his dad and a couple others. And it's a really sad end of the book, but it really makes you think. So obviously it's really hard to recap such a great book in such a short amount of time, but hopefully I did an okay job and you understand what the book's about. But now to get to the really important part, which is the themes and the symbolism and the metaphors used in this book that really make it such a good read, and a book that you kind of have to read back on and reread some things, because it doesn't catch you on the first time around, but it's just really so amazing when it comes all together. The first really important theme in this book is social class. We see this a lot. We see it in Nick coming to a high-end part of New York, coming from kind of a middle-class family, and he's kind of thrown into this upper-class lifestyle where from the outside it may seem like everything's perfect, but we can see very clearly in Tom and Daisy's life and in Gatsby's life that just because you have money doesn't really mean that life is perfect. There's still a lot of the same struggles and arguably more struggles. Some problems regarding social class for Gatsby are the fact that he grew up with nothing and he worked for this money, supposedly, but when he finally got to the top, he was just trying to create this persona about him to impress a girl, and he was never really truly happy because he was always yearning for this thing that he couldn't reach. And just to digress quickly, that brings me to one of the amazing symbols in the book is the green light. There's a green light on the end of Daisy's dock that Gatsby can see from over the water. He's always looking at it. Nick kind of sees this happening throughout the entire book. As the light fades, kind of his connection with Daisy fades, and eventually she leaves and he dies. And it's just a really great symbol that expresses a lot of Gatsby's character throughout the book. Another section of this book that kind of ties in with social class is Tom and Daisy's life. Now we see the treatment of women is a lot different back then than it is now. Obviously now they're equal to men, but back then they were looked at as second-class citizens, and even though Tom's so abusive and he openly cheats on his wife, Daisy can't really do anything about it. I kind of touched on it before, but another theme is kind of the upper-class lifestyle experience through the eyes of a middle class man. The entire book's kind of from the perspective of Nick, so we get to see this different side of the upper class that we don't usually get to see, and how it's not all perfect all the time. Now the final part of this book I want to touch on is another piece of symbolism, and it's these eyes that kind of dominate a lot of the book. When Tom and the group go to Wilson's house, who was Myrtle's husband, there's this billboard ad that has these eyes on it, and that, it's looking down on the actions of everyone pretty much. Later on in the book, that kind of becomes important because when Myrtle gets hit by the car and Tom tells Wilson Gatsby did it, it's these eyes that are looking over them and kind of dictating what their future will be based on the decisions they make. And now I could go on forever about how great this book is and all the little nuances within it that make it so great, but I think I've made my point pretty clear. It's an incredible book and I had a lot of fun reading it, and although it's short, there's so much packed into it that I think is still relevant to today, like I was talking about. So that's it. I feel like every student should read this book. I had a great time reading it, and that's about it. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you later.